Everyone quiet down, please. Lord Arius, it is a relief to see you again, but I have to say you don't exactly make sense. What exactly happened during your expedition? What have you found, and how have you returned without anyone noticing? We came back on our ships, of course. Mr. Storm and Galadea used their magical skills to speed us along the way because they knew we had to get back here as quickly as possible and warn everyone. Problem is, our ships are not built for speeds like that, so many of them fell apart on the way home. Those that remained are not in a great shape, so no wonder no one recognized us as we came to port. But it doesn't matter, just as I said. I need you to contact Raylis somehow, so we can end this war right now, even if that means our unconditional surrender. Because if we won't find a way to stop it or flee, then...
Surrender? Have you lost your mind out there, Lord Governor? If you haven't been receiving reports, then let me enlighten you. We're beating the crap out of Emerald colonies right now. So far, every engagement was a victory, and we're in the process of marching on their main settlement in the archipelago. And you want us to stop and even surrender to them?
Yes, because it doesn't matter. Something bad is coming, and if we won't all unite to stop whatever it is, we're all going to die regardless of who will win this war. We can't afford disunity right now. Lord Arius, pardon my bluntness, but you're not exactly making a lot of sense right now. You say that something is coming, but do you know what it actually is? No, not in the slightest. But I know that these so-called immortals were not alone, but a part of greater civilization, larger and more powerful than anything we can imagine. And they were clear. Our existence was an abomination to them, and they would do all in their power to eradicate us. This doesn't clarify anything, Lord Governor. You were the one who told us to cut into the heart of Emerald colonies, and now you come back with some wild tale that doesn't make any sense, and tell us to do completely opposite thing. So if you could just explain... There's no time. I can still just order you to obey my order, so... Actually, Lord Governor, you can't. It's your own rule. In situations crucial to the state of Medzaka, you always need to make the decision jointly with civilian governor, Lord Arcadian. In your hands, Governor. Apologies, Arius, but Gerstein's right. I believe you that something weird is happening, but I first need to understand what it is. So please, explain everything that happened. Very well. Let's start from the beginning then. We arrived on the island Zabulus was leading us to a few months ago, and as soon as we made landfall, we realized the place was different from the rest of the archipelago. We saw some barren wastelands around, but no place was so empty and so devoid of life as that island. It was all covered in ash, even though there were no volcanoes or magma flows around, and we saw no plants and animals anywhere. At first, it was difficult to believe anyone would consider living in such a place, but Zabulus was sure, and led us deeper inland with conviction I have never seen in her before. She claimed that now that she stepped on that island, memories of her fellow Fae who were brought here for unknown reasons all came to the surface, and she immediately pointed the direction in which we should go. We spent 2 days marching through silent ash fields, undisturbed even by wind, and then, finally we saw it, the Pillared City. Or what little was left of it. For as we came closer, it became obvious that if this place had glory days, they were long gone, and what once must have been an impressive city built on a plane of a circle was now nothing but a silent, collapsed ruin. Pillars and buildings that once must have been 100 meters tall were worn down and broken apart, leaving only a handful of structures undamaged. It felt as if some kind of calamity struck this place, as these ruins all seemed scorched, as if a fire-breathing dragon flew above it, or maybe an entire flock of them. But while some of the buildings were still intact, they were nothing but empty shells with only ash and dust inside. Whoever lived there before was long gone, and so we continued deeper into the ruins, and there, in the very center, in an open round area in the middle of a great broken building, we found the Undead Legion, what was left of it. They were all just standing there in silence, waiting for us, rows of pikemen and crossbowmen, led by one of their black giants. And it was there when linguistic abilities of Professor Sagrat helped us, for over the months at sea she helped us understand the language that the undead spoke in. As soon as they saw us, the giant stepped forward and told us to turn back and never return. Otherwise, as it said, his masters would be forced to kill us all. Of course, we haven't come all this way to turn back now, so we responded with a barrage of light cannons and guns, and the battle began in full. But while before we faced hundreds of enemies, this time their number only barely went up of 100. It was clear that we did a number on them in previous encounters, but at the same time our expedition was smaller as well, so even though they were no army we expected, we were still outnumbered. But as the fight began, we realized that they were not fighting to win, but simply to delay us for as long as possible. As we have proven in our previous encounters though, their forces were no match for us, even with their numbers. They took positions around the center ruins, tried to delay us on stairs and in choke points, but we simply beat them back on every approach. They fought bravely though, with suicidal drive that made them all the more dangerous, but they could not stop our advance. Our tanks set them on fire, our guns blasted holes in their formations, and slowly but surely we advanced, still feeling an odd sense of unease. We realized by then that they were just trying to slow us down, so I gave some questionable orders that put my soldiers at risk to get rid of any obstacles sooner. After all, we have not chased this lead across the entire archipelago just to fail, now when our goal was just within reach. And though we took some losses, including all of our elementals who were with us for so long, we managed to push through decaying soldiers and found out what they were guarding. It was a tunnel leading deep underground, and far in a distance, an odd circular hole in the ground which emanated clouds of smoke. A scout sent ahead confirmed that the hole was too deep to access from outside, so we assumed that the tunnel would lead to it. And so we marched into darkness, into labyrinthine web of metallic corridors, built in completely different style than the city above. A handful of undead soldiers were still there and we lost more men trying to push through their delaying ambushes, but in the end we reached massive steel doors. In front of it stood a single one of these secretive people, his eyes glowing blue, cold like frostling winter. He was adorned with odd metallic ornaments, but otherwise unarmed, and as we came closer, he raised his arms. We could see now that this was a man some long time ago, but this man was now tired and broken, and as we moved towards it, it started to speak in an odd, accented voice, but in our own tongue. "So you made it this far. I suppose it would be too much to ask you to just turn back and leave and forget you ever saw this place. I didn't think so. It is a shame we're meeting under such circumstances, considering the relations between us." Needless to say, we asked him to explain, but he ignored us. "There is no need for you to understand," he said, his voice still tired and defeated, "for you will not be able to do anything with this knowledge. Let me just say that your current predicament is not your fault. You were all simply poisoned by power far beyond your understanding, yours and ours. What's worse, as the director of this facility, it is my fault for allowing this to happen. I should have been more observant. I should have seen the signs sooner. But I was so excited to walk in, so full of ambition to turn this place into the greatest bioshock laboratory in the galaxy. But never mind all that. As I said, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you cannot be allowed to ever leave, and if we want to ensure that you won't bring disaster upon every living being among the stars, then we must eradicate you. I must eradicate you, my own creations. And with all this, the man pointed to dilapidated ruins around him, with all this, I can't even do this properly. So this is my final apology. You are going to die. All of you. It won't be quick, and I'm sorry for it, but there's simply no other way. Forgive me for that, if you can. Now, Attention all Commonwealth personnel. If anyone is still out there, this is our final order. Power down. It is much sooner than we expected it to be, but it is time for us to face the void together. Nothingness awaits. It's been an honor to work with you. In this moment, the man's eyes simply went blank. The glow disappeared and he fell lifeless to the ground, but there was no time to ponder what happened, for as he fell to the floor a rumble and a terrifying shriek came from other side of massive steel doors. We knew immediately that this was the final attack of these now dead people, something that, as they said, will result in deaths of all of us. So, without wasting time, we started walking to unlock the doors. Opening them was an impossible task though, and it took all gunpowder we had to blast even a small hole in them. As we did so though, the rumble suddenly stopped, just for a second, and then, in a blinding flash of light, something on the other side roared and spewed flames all over the place, with a force that blasted doors away. If not for Mr. Storm and his timely protection spell, we would have died there, either from the sheer force of the blast or from the flames that followed it. Nothing could have saved us from the blinding light though, something I felt even through my glasses as you can see, and by the time we came to, the thing inside was already gone, flying into the skies. Whatever it was, we were too late to stop it and no one could tell where it went, other than straight up. It was the worst feeling in my entire life. We have failed. We spent so much time chasing this city of immortals, and when we finally found it, they simply all killed themselves just to stop us from what? We still have no idea why they have considered us so threatening. They were willing to eradicate themselves completely just to harm us. Still, there was nothing to be done. We evacuated our wounded back to the shore and started thinking about heading back ourselves, but Galadea decided to give the ruins, especially that metallic underground part, one more look. Together with her, Mr. Storm and a handful of trusted soldiers, we went down there, and let me tell you, the place went down a lot further than we expected. It was all dead and empty though, with no signs of life, all except for one room at the very bottom. As we entered it, several flickering lights appeared on the walls, illuminating a large, black, mechanical object. It looked scorched and heavily damaged, but it was softly humming with energy. And as we came closer, some more lights woke up and something strange emerged from inside. Something I really wish I could forget.
Analysis complete. No Commonwealth personnel detected in facility. Checking logs. No Commonwealth personnel detected in all facilities across the planet. Initiating backup protocol. Analyzing language. Analysis complete. Greetings, inhabitants of this world. On behalf of Biosoc Research Division of Galactic Commonwealth, I welcome you to this facility.
What in Star's name is this abomination? Your Highness, step back!
There is no need to be alarmed. I am merely interface of the computing machine you see in front of you. The Vice Director of this place decided that a face and voice would be far more preferable to cold screen with data.
So, you are part of this machine? Are you alive?
Negative. I am what is called a virtual intelligence, not as advanced as true artificial intelligence and not self-aware. I am, however, capable of providing you with answers to questions you no doubt have.
And why would you do this? Your masters above were not very forthcoming when it came to sharing what they knew.
I have not been informed of any additional conditions. My programming states that if there is no more Commonwealth presence on the planet, I am to act as guide to local organic population to ensure their safe and stable existence. I am also obliged to share with you contents of databanks of this facility to ensure your knowledge will be sufficient to understand your situation.
And what situation is that?
Checking. Data files corrupted. Apologies. It would seem that my mainframe suffered some critical physical damage, and my last maintenance check was over 99999 days ago. Searching for accessible files right now. Recovering. Logs of Site Director Brevich can be accessed now. Warning. It seems that my power source has been disconnected. Estimated battery time unknown.
I'm not sure what that means, but I think we should hurry up. Play these logs, machine. Beginning log 1 of Terra Nova facility. I still can't believe I'm actually recording this. After almost a century of preparations, I am sitting here in a laboratory the size of a planet as appointed director of Bioshock Research Division. When this idea first came to minds of a group, it was more wishful thinking than anything else, but here we are. And what a place it is. Exactly the kind our probes combed the stars for. About 90 years ago, one of the drones reported planet Kadaya 5 as a mostly unremarkable frozen planet. It had a nitrogen-rich atmosphere with traces of oxygen, helium and argon, but otherwise it was just a ball of ice, with temperatures never going above -100 Celsius. Normally, it would be ignored. Now that we moved to Azure Galaxy, we have nearly endless habitable worlds to colonize, but some properties of this world caught our attention. Day and night cycle lasts 24 hours and 7 minutes here, and the planet moves around its sun in 363 days. So, to put it bluntly, it is pretty much exactly the same as old Earth was, and the closest match we ever found to the cradle of humanity. It is, unfortunately, in a rather backwater corner of Azure Galaxy, and even today there's only a handful of mostly automated mining posts scattered across hundreds of light years. But that remoteness proved to be good for us, for when we presented our plan to Commonwealth Council, they approved it, precisely because the place was so out of the way. Over the next 75 years, our automated terraformers worked tirelessly to turn this place into something as close to old Earth as possible. Temperature was the main problem, but a simple lens installed between the planet and the star resolved that issue nicely, and it lowered the radiation on the planet, as well as the amount of solar winds, which helped with the atmosphere. With massive amounts of water ice, it was mostly a matter of stabilizing the atmosphere for carbon-based life, and there we go. Now, Terra Nova is a continental planet that may not look like Earth in terms of continents and oceans, for we have far more water here than back home, but biochemical conditions are pretty much the same. And, to be perfectly honest, the amount of oceans should actually help us. With 2 moons orbiting Terra Nova, the seas are a lot more dangerous than on original Earth, but this fits our idea perfectly, as it will help us isolate every one of our experiments. And experiments in question, well, they're not going to be small-scale ones. We have already proven that we can create intelligent life. The Vryn are an important part of our society now, after all, but now we wish to go one step beyond. We do not just want to create life. We wish to observe how it evolves and how societies are made from ground up and how they expand and evolve based on their surroundings. We will speed the process along, of course, for we have the means to do that without affecting our future charges, but the idea is to simply plant intelligent life here and observe how it behaves. Some will inevitably say that we're played gods, but let's be honest, we crossed that boundary ages ago. First we created the Vryn, and then we abandoned our useless organic mortal bodies and turned synthetic. Besides, we have the technology to ensure that our charges will be safe and well provisioned. After all, we do not want them to just randomly die and ruin the entire experiment. But I've been talking for too long. It's time to get back to work. We have several continents to populate, an entire databank of DNA to play with. I can't wait to see what my assistant will cook up. These past years were, in all probabilities, the busiest ones in my life. With best tech Bioshock Division can offer, creating new organic life forms was a piece of cake, though I have to say, end results in many cases are a bit underwhelming. Not from purely practical standpoint though. Beings created by underground labs all across the planet are diverse, resilient and extremely well designed, but at the same time they lack a bit of creative spark. Put it bluntly, it seems people of my department went through a bit too many fantasy books in their youth, as beings they created here are nothing but copies of fantasy tropes. We have orcs, goblins, dwarves, even elves, thanks to Thadraka's DNA we had in our databanks. There are, of course, regular humans as well, but the most interesting ones were designed by Branch on Archipelago 2. Dragons, sea-dwelling humanoids with fish-like bits, these weird kappa things. Granted, most of them are still fantasy tropes, but I have to say they're extremely well designed. Also, one of the assistants on Archipelago 2 somehow managed to procure samples of Yadran DNA, which allowed us to recreate them. Or so we hoped. End results turn out to be a bit more humanoid than regular Cathamas were, but the scaly skin, horns and all that fancy detail is still there. Now then, this was just the first step. Now we have to prepare these creatures to step into this world and see how they'll perform. Implementation of all artificially created species to land the seas of Kadaya 5 went without a hitch, all thanks to the data almost 2 millennia old. As Vryn taught us, we were able to create intelligent life relatively easily, but we can't expect said life to develop actual society overnight. But that is where creation protocols of old Commonwealth clone armies prove their usefulness. Clones have been outdated for ages now, but one bit from their conditioning turned out to be very helpful for us. Basically, we used said mental conditioning to give our creations a backstory. It's nothing special, a tale about worldwide calamity that destroyed ancient world and civilizations, and only tiny pockets of remnants survived it. As I said, quite uninspired, but at the same time it neatly answered the inevitable questions of why there's no remnants of previous world around. All our creations went through conditioning process and now firmly believe that this is their backstory, and so we were able to release them into the world without much problems. Now the real work begins, observing what they will do with themselves and the world around them, and in time, how will they react when meeting other cultures? It would seem that violence is something that, no matter how hard we try, we simply cannot remove from organic life. During their conditioning, we beat into heads of our charges values of cooperation, productivity and peace, and while they don't have issues with first two, last one proves a bit problematic, as evidenced by first civil war between dragon tribes. It was so bad we had to intervene in this one, and not just for the sake of them, but for all other tribes in Archipelago too, as their dragons turned out to be a bit too powerful for their own good. We had to rewrite some bits of their genetic code to weaken them, and while it wasn't an easy task to do without leaving traces of our meddling, we managed to pull it off over the course of half a decade. Other than that, the experiment is proving to be an amazing success. Various societies formed all over the planet and began building up their presence and even started exploring around. There were some early issues, like when goblins met cat people and almost started killing each other over some perceived slights, but common sense prevailed in most of these situations. We will continue our observations. We have turned this place into absolute treasure trove of knowledge, and so far we only barely scratched the surface. Things proceed as planned. Societies grow and evolve, new groups and ideas appear, contacts are made, usually peaceful, but sometimes not. Technological progress is being made, slowly but surely. The discovery of ironworking proved to be a major stepping stone for our chargers, who now, using new tools, expand faster and further than ever before. Observations continue, and so do praises from the Bioshock HQ. This post may be out of the way, sure, but it certainly is a prestigious and valuable one. Observations continue as usual, but some things appear to be a bit off. For one, responses from home started to be sluggish and non-committal, as if every single one of our requests for more personnel and resources went through an entire bureaucratic loop, only to be denied at the end after long deliberations. We can still work with what we have, but more resources would always be welcome, especially since our charges started to act odd, at least some of them. They began hiding out in various mines and underground places in which we can't really monitor them. What's more, we caught some glimpses of conversations and written records that indicate that they may be aware of us. I'm sending requests to other branches around the planet to mask their operations better. We can't afford to make our presence known, as it will invalidate the entire experiment. This one will be a bit longer than usual, for this year turned out to be one of the most eventful in recorded history. So many things happened that I could spend hours here just rambling about them, but I'll try to keep this report as brief as possible, though, truth be told, I don't even know where to start. At the start of the year, we all received news that no one really expected. Task Force Manticore and Admiral Ibrahim returned from Unbidden Dimension, and more than that, they returned victorious, even though they were but a fraction of the force sent away, and those who made it back all showed scars they earned during this fight. But while they fought bravely and valiantly for centuries, it was not through military matters that they achieved victory, but through cooperation and mutual understanding. Admiral Ibrahim, or, well, CSV Ibrahim, as she is basically the part of her flagship right now, realized that fighting the Unbidden on their own turf conventionally was nothing but a suicide mission. So instead, she carved her way to what she described as center of their dimension, and forced their so-called king to listen to her. It was an arduous journey, but she made it, and after negotiations that apparently took almost a century to finish, she and the king realized that they were not each other's foes. Instead, they were all placed in this predicament by a power far more malicious than ever before, the Shroud. It almost completely destroyed Unbidden side of reality, and now entangled our own universe in its grasp and pushed us into conflict. We were one of the first to understand this threat by leaving our organic bodies behind, and when Unbidden King realized it, he reluctantly agreed to a ceasefire so that we could focus our attention on the true enemy. That ceasefire, however, came with demands. The Unbidden need to consume energy to sustain their lives, and we were to provide them with that energy. In old times, such a demand would be impossible, and even with our technology it will be a massive endeavor, but the Council is confident we can do it. Dozens of stars in the cluster have already been marked as spots for construction of Dyson spheres, and thousands upon thousands are to be later deployed here, in Azure Galaxy, once we master their construction. Some claim that it is a mistake, that we are about to hand over large portions of space to our enemies, but it's not that drastic. The Unbidden care not for habitable worlds or resources. All they wish for is energy, and so we can hand over empty systems to them in exchange for their cooperation. And cooperation we will have, for already several research expeditions were sent to their dimension, and within months provided us with untold amount of new data. For now though, the Unbidden will remain next to the white hole that Zrakans and Shroud created during Last Light, and while it certainly feels odd knowing they're so close to our core walls, so far they have proved to be peaceful, content to just sit around in their own system and dine on endless stream of energy ejected from the former Zrakan homeworld. But this year was also marked by another historic moment, the final disconnection of psionics. Through our political, and sometimes military pressure, we have managed to convince nearly all other galactic nations, whether in the cluster or here in Azure Galaxy, to switch their bodies to synthetic ones, as the Shroud is unable to manipulate non-organic minds. But this year, the last remaining power that offered shelter to psionics, the Eternal Empire, no doubt pressured by presence of the Unbidden and revelatory knowledge they provided us with, decided to ban all psionics as well. Those from other nations were deported back, and right now are undergoing forcible cybernetization to sever their connection to this otherworldly power. The Imperial ones, on the other hand, well, it was obvious that they would never hand over their own citizens to us, but we still made progress. After several incidents over the past centuries, Empire created an extensive database of their psionically active citizens, and now used it to mark all of them for genetic rewrite. Long story short, they have figured out that certain parts of organic brain can be remade to block all influence from the Shroud, or so they say, and right now their people are all undergoing this treatment. Even the reasoning is purely imperial. The current emperor decreed that only he and his government can influence their people, and any outside meddling, even from the Shroud, is nothing short of illegal and seditious. Weird as this may sound though, it seems their plan is working, and billions of imperial citizens already went through the treatment, though only time will tell if such a move won't have any unforeseen consequences. Still, there's no convincing them to go cyberneting like the rest of the cluster did, so we have to take what we can get. But all that also finally pushed the Empire to acknowledge that we, the Commonwealth, are not responsible for all evils among the stars. It will be decades or maybe even centuries before we resolve our differences, but first step was made mere 10 days ago. on extranet broadcast viewed by thousands of billions of people across the stars, Chancellor Gazana Spinaka and Emperor Darius IV proclaimed that our nations will bury the hatchet and unite against the threat of the Shroud. It looks like the conflict that we have brought from Old Earth is finally over, and while it will not be an easy process, we began march towards the united humanity, even though, with our cybernetization and imperial genetic modifications, we're pretty much nothing like humans of old. But it is a glorious news anyway, and, pardon for being blunt, I'm going to get myself blind drunk to celebrate it. We will prosper among the stars, now more than ever. Another odd occurrence. Our requests are still denied every time, but we still welcomed guests to our planet today. An expedition from Ministry of Internal Security, led by some miserable man called Operative C. He brought with him a company worth of troops to serve as increased security, as he said, and an entire cargo ship of resources and automated drones, and immediately began building something on the lower levels. My inquiries as to what it is remain unanswered, but judging by the sheer amount of material needed, it must be massive. Still, we're not allowed to know, so I suppose the only thing we can do is get back to work and hope for the best. That bastard C started killing our charges. Last night he took a squadron of his soldiers to a shuttle, flew to northern continent and just outright murdered everyone in a remote mining village, and then practically leveled the place to the ground. He did so in such a way that hiding it will be an absolute nightmare, and what's worse, he refuses to explain himself. He just says that he did it to ensure this project will go for long enough to justify resources spent on it. I have no idea what that means, but I will figure it out. Something is wrong. Very wrong. We used our own drones to follow ones from the Ministry and found out something remarkable. Those isolated settlements and deep mines our charges started to gather in, they were turned into temples of some kind, with altars to some nebulous creatures we never heard about. What's worse, beings in this isolated area started showing some alarming abilities that can't be explained with science. Things like tele and pyrokinesis, ability to discharge tremendous amounts of energy and seemingly at will. It doesn't make sense unless... Log continuation. I confronted Operative C about our findings and he confirmed my worst fears. First, he brought me to the lowest levels of our facility and showed me what his deep drills uncovered. This planet's crust may be unremarkable, but deeper down everything is made almost exclusively from one mineral, the Asian crystal, the same material that ancient pyramid on Redamon Prime was made of. In itself, it's not really a problem, but Asian crystal is also known to be the major catalyst for psionic abilities, and that is precisely the reason why our project was approved. We were never meant to study biological life and societies. We were placed here to monitor how the Shroud would affect less advanced civilizations. Problem is that, according to C, they never expected it to entangle our charges so fast. These raids he launched were to take down those who mastered their psionic abilities, but it seems that the amount of psionically active people on the planet is growing at an extremely alarming rate. C called for reinforcements from actual military, and we're now waiting for shuttles to evacuate the surface and move to our orbital station. If C is right, then the Navy will simply glass the place from orbit to ensure the Shroud will not spread beyond confines of this single world. And while I understand hatred of this weird power, I can't feel anything other than anger and shame. Such a long, promising experiment turned out to be nothing but a lie, and now all these peoples we have created and nurtured over past years will have to die just to satisfy Commonwealth's fearful interest in this otherworldly phenomena. Still, we all know what the Shroud is capable of. We still feel the effects of Last Light even today, but it doesn't make me feel any better. I suppose we should prepare some form of neutering agent. Maybe we can put down our charges peacefully, without the need of turning the entire planet into dust. Log continuation. We are stranded. Last week turned out to be nothing but one disaster after another. First, the wormhole opened at the edge of the system, but instead of the fleet we expected, only a handful of space debris came out from it. Then, the wormhole collapsed on itself with such power that the generator on our site simply fell apart, leaving us cut off from the rest of the Commonwealth. Then,
Mere days later, a solar flare happened, one on a scale never seen before. All of our people who were outside were shut down, and our shuttles and our orbital base went completely offline. What's worse, we can't reach the orbital no matter what we do, which means we're stuck on the planet. Only few hundreds of us survived, those locked in underground, and most of our equipment and reactors are no longer working. Fortunately, this computer, built deep in the ground, is still operational, because I have a bad feeling that it'll soon become the only thing left of us. I need to go now. If we wish to survive here until help arrives, we need to get to work right away. I will not be able to make these logs too often. The battery pack on this computer will not last forever, and what little power we have is used for other means. Still, let me at least describe our situation. First, it has been a decade since our wormhole generator collapsed, and we received no news from home ever since. These generators are considered to be of vital strategic importance to the Commonwealth, so the fact no one bothered to fix it must mean the situation is more problematic than we thought. Maybe the Unbidden proved to be less friendly than we hoped. Maybe one of the largest empires in this galaxy finally took offense to our expansion and decided to stop us. It's impossible to say, but the end result is undeniable. We are stranded here on this planet without means of getting out. And after the solar flare fried almost all of our equipment, we're barely capable to sustain even our small team. Even worse, we are now alone on a planet full of psionically active beings who will, without a doubt, use lack of oversight to spread themselves all over the world. And that is why Operative C seized control of the facility and revealed something that he and his security team have been planning ever since they arrived. What we thought to be lowest level of this facility turned out to be nothing but an upper level of a larger, self-sufficient factory line designed for construction of synthetic bodies, even massive 6-meter ones. Initially, the plan was to use them as a sort of sleeper agents, create them, set them free into various societies on this planet and monitor them directly through their own eyes. Unfortunately, with things moving as fast as they do, that plan was no longer viable. Instead, Operative C decided to use these synths as an army. We will create a legion of unfeeling, obedient synthetic humanoids and implant them with very basic combat VI. Once it's done, C plans to march out of the facility, pacify Archipelago 2, which is our home base, and then eradicate all signs of psionically active beings all over the planet. The main goal is to link up with automated research base on the northern continent, which should have additional power cores that should survive the solar flare, and even if they did not, northern continent houses massive natural reserves of uranium, which we can use to create limited power sources for our needs. But that leads to another problem. Commonwealth society is so advanced and automated at this point that without access to our machines we're almost completely helpless. As we speak, we are only barely able to sustain ourselves and provide our team with basic necessities like food, which, while compatible with our synthetic bodies, is nowhere near as efficient as actual electricity. Aside from that, equipping the army of Operative C will be nothing short of a nightmare. It took us almost entirety of this decade to figure out basic metallurgy, so we will be fighting our own creations with primitive weapons. We have a cache of shock grenades, which they will probably consider to be magical, but that's it. If C wants to go to war against the entire world, he will have to do so with swords and spears and bows. We'll be fighting on even terms, so I can only hope we'll be up to the task. Hopefully, our superior knowledge will prevail. A millennium in darkness. 10 centuries marked by near constant war. But this war is not going anywhere. We pacified several races, like the Fae, on the archipelago, but the Carthemas struck us back. Our draconian creations were smarter than we gave them credit for, and instead of just trying to defend their home territory, they allowed us to rampage freely across it, while their commanders prepared a flanking move aimed right at our heart. We managed to repel them, and kill over 100,000 of them in the process, but the damage they caused was catastrophic. The Shroud gave them abilities to control fire, quite fitting given their dragon-like looks, which they used to cause massive firestorm in our base. Most of our facilities were destroyed, including machines needed to create more synths, which means C's campaign of conquest is now doomed to fail, and we are left without options.
What's worse, several years before that a massive earthquake shook the planet, and judging by our limited readings, it was caused by a thermonuclear detonation. No one on this world should have the ability to create something like that, which can only mean one thing. That automated base on the northern continent must have suffered some form of malfunction, or maybe even sabotage, and its contents were detonated. We no longer have any options. We tried rebuilding our facilities, but local stars keep blasting us with solar flares. We are lost here, and judging by the silence among the stars, no one is coming. Another millennium of silence. C has been consumed by his militaristic campaigns and keeps leading our increasingly dwindling numbers of synths to battle across the archipelago, to contain the threat, as he says. But the threat is already free of any confines, and has been for centuries. We have failed. Cathemus and even Faye managed to take back the control of the archipelago, and presence of the Shroud is stronger than usual. Solar flares keep blasting our unshielded equipment, so we're still unable to send any call for help, but at this point no one believes such help would ever arrive. For all intents and purposes, we will live the rest of our days here, in this ruined base on a scorched island. Even our bodies started to slowly decompose, for without proper equipment and resources we have no means of maintaining them. I look like a corpse now, all of us do. Fancy corpses with metallic bits slithering in the dark corners of the world we created. To call it pathetic would be a monumental understatement. C claims he has a plan. Something regarding power batteries for those holographic tourist attractions we have made before we were cut off from the rest of the Commonwealth. They're certainly quite potent and well shielded, so there's a good chance they survived solar flares, but I have no idea how they could help. C refuses to answer. I fear he's already too far gone into depths of his own bloodthirsty madness. Then again, no wonder. He saw with his own eyes effects of last light, so the idea of a world full of psionics must anger him beyond any reason. It's over. C has gone completely mad. He claims we're all infected by the Shroud, and so he won't share his plan with me. It doesn't matter though, because we were found out again. This time by humanoids from another continent, who colonized this archipelago over past decades. They hounded C's raiding parties for years now and defeated them at every occasion, and now they're here, determined to find our secrets, disappointing as they may be. They wield weapons far more advanced than we do, things like firearms and machines of war. We were fools, desperate to rebuild our advanced technology without even thinking about intermediate steps. But it doesn't matter now. C has already fallen, so his plan died with him. All that is left for me to do is to prepare for my own inevitable demise. But I will not let them win. If I have to burn this world I helped create to the ground, then so be it. Director Brevich of Bioshock Division, signing off. And that was it. As you can see, it doesn't provide us with many answers, but we still know our foes are willing to destroy us all. And even though they may not be connected to their home, if our presence was so terrifying to them, we can safely assume their masters would stop at nothing to eradicate us all. And while we don't know the details of their plan, there may still be a way to stop it. Once we learn of our impending doom, Zabulus said there's a place northwest of here, not that far from Bernoth, where ancient knowledge of this world can be found. If we could go there, we could find a way to stop...
Stop what? A mysterious unknown weapon that may or may not be dangerous? An ancient star-dwelling race that doesn't seem to be able to reach any star? And for what? No, do not say to save ourselves. For all we know, this was nothing but an empty threat. But I'm thinking of something else, Lord Arius. I'm thinking that your expedition, which costed us untold amounts of money and resources which could be better used for war, failed, and now you are looking for a way to redeem yourself without looking like a complete failure in the eyes of your people. Am I correct?
Not at all. Why would I lie about it? Why would I make up this entire story?
To save your reputation, of course. What's the other reason you decided to sneak in here in the middle of the night?
To
to avoid spreading panic. Of course you'd say that, but I think we all agree that this has gone for long enough now. Lord Arius, we are in the middle of a war now. War that you, of all people in this room, are most responsible for. And now you want us to give you even more money and even more men and go off for another wild goose chase, while forces of your former betrothed may appear on the horizon at any moment.
I have to admit, Lord Arius, this is not exactly a plausible explanation. I don't deny that parts of your tale may be true, but we simply can't allow yet another pointless waste of resources in a situation like this. Surely you understand? I do. But remember that I am still military commander of Medzaka, and when it comes to matters of army, I have the final say. Unless you have something to add, Arcadian. I do. Unfortunately, old friend, I do. You saddled me with all this political nonsense and left to chase some nonsensical fairy tales. Shroud, synths. It all sounds fascinating, true, but if anything, it sounds too perfect. As Gerstein said, some bits of it sound plausible, and I'd love to investigate them further, but we simply can't do it now, no matter how urgent it may seem. Which is why, Lord Arius, I'm afraid I must ask you to step down from your position, temporarily at least, and return to your quarters. You and your retainers will be placed under house arrest until we can ensure your actions won't endanger the war effort. Once you prove that your loyalty is to Medzaka and not to your wild chase, then you can return to your post. And then, once the war is over, I will personally happily help you investigate your claims in full. Is everyone in favor? Like hell you're arresting anyone, I fear. Take one step and—
Galadea, stop. I have always said that what I do is for the people of Medzaka, so I will not have you kill public servants for doing the very same thing. If they consider me to be mad, then it is their right. But let me just warn you that, as I said when I came here, our current affairs are inconsequential if these Commonwealth people manage to fulfill their plans. I can only hope you will realize that before it's too late. Here's my seal, Gerstein. Use it well. Galadea, Mr. Storm, Zabulus, please return to your quarters in my mansion, and do not leave unless we are summoned. I will do the same. Thank you, Lord Arius. I can assure you this is not a personal issue, and I will make sure this state of affairs will only be temporary. I'd like to believe that, Lord Governor Gerstein. Now please, let me retire to my rooms. No need to worry the guards though, I know the way.